Joining us now, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, author of The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton, frame Donald Trump, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, and the author of An Introduction to the Mueller Report, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, I'm going to start with you. I read your column. I almost read the whole thing on radio today. You have tried up until today, and we've had much disagreement on this, to defend Mueller, to respect the process, even though we all know that under Article 2, the president always had the authority to fire him for conflicts, etc. He would have just been replaced. Very few people seem to point that out. What did you see today that changed your mind?
What I saw today was him putting his thumb, his elbow on the scale when he said, quote, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. That was absolutely inappropriate for him to say. It was worse than anything that Comey said when he exonerated Hillary Clinton and then said, but she engaged in extremely careless conduct. Everybody condemned that. This is much, much worse. And it does show that he had a motive to help the Democrats here. There's no other possible motive why he would have gone out of his way to say that. He could have easily said the opposite. If we had confidence that the president didn't commit a crime, we would have said it. If we had confidence that he committed a crime, we would have said it. But no, he emphasized only the possibility the president might have committed a crime. That went well beyond his authority as special counsel. It also showed we never should have had a special counsel. We should have had an objective, neutral, nonpartisan investigative commission looking into the entire effort of Russia to intrude itself into the 2016 election and continuing to the 2020 election and proposing efforts to ameliorate that in the future. A special counsel was a terrible, terrible mistake, and I think Mueller's statement today proves that beyond any doubt.
Greg, you wrote a powerful column yourself, The Two Faces of Robert Mueller, but I will say I was steadfast in my analysis from the beginning.
Right.
Only Democratic donors. Weissman at the victory party.
Sure.
Weissman, the pit bull, his atrocious record. Jeannie Ray, he couldn't find one Republican donor, not one.
No. And what struck me today is that Mueller's peddling two stories. He tells the American people that he couldn't bring an obstruction case against the president because of an Office of Legal Counsel OLC opinion, which, by the way, is advisory. It's not mandatory. And he told William Barr, the Attorney General, not once, not twice, but 3 times something completely different.
And by the way, there were witnesses to this.
Right. He said the OLC opinion had nothing whatsoever to do with my non-decision decision. So who's telling the truth here? His core argument, this man's core argument that you see on the screen is, we cannot prove the president did not commit obstruction of justice. Think about what that means. That's a double negative. He is reversing the burden of proof and inverting the presumption of innocence. Prosecutors are not in the business of exonerating people. He is tainting and smearing the president and forcing him to prove he didn't do something wrong. That has never been, for more than 200 years, the standard in American justice. And it's not only a clever maneuver, it's a devious maneuver by a devious man, Bob Mueller.
Let me go to you, Sarah Carter, because, you know, why were his statements, Mueller's statements, intended to hurt Trump? And we all know that prosecutors, if they don't reach a standard of indictment, they don't leave a cloud. There's a reason for that, and that is you don't have the right to say, well, I don't have the evidence, but maybe something happened. And that's what he did today.
Yes, he did. It's shameful, actually, what Robert Mueller did. And it's also very devious, as Greg said. And I agree 100% with Alan Dershowitz on this as well. What he did was he did leave a dark cloud, and he intended to do so. I think of what Senator Chuck Schumer said last year in October when he said to President Trump, when you go after the intelligence community, they have 6 ways to Sunday to getting back at you. Think about this. Think about Mueller's relationship relationship with Comey, how close they are, how tight they are, what was going on here, what was the intention of Mueller even making this statement. The only reason Mueller did what he did today was to presumably put that dark cloud over President Trump. But I've got something else to tell him. Based on what I'm hearing, the Department of Justice and others are investigating thoroughly, including John Durham, what happened at the very beginning of the investigation into the Russia election into the election in 2016, where they tried to basically create a situation where they would find somebody within the Trump campaign that they could say colluded with Russia. There has been no evidence of that. There's been no collusion. There's been no obstruction. And now they're going to the very beginning of the investigation, and they're going to find out what happened. They're going to find out who did what and the false lies that were placed in that dossier and how they utilized those lies to create a disinformation campaign against the President of the United States.
Overwhelming
and that's
is the
what they're
evidence
afraid.
That the president now has declassified and put in the hands of the Attorney General of the United States. We've always talked about 5 buckets. We've talked about exculpatory evidence, 302s, Gang of 8, and the FISA applications themselves, which we know, because the top of a FISA application says verified, was unverifiable, but the bulk of information that was used all 4 times dealt with Hillary's bought and paid for Russian disinformation dossier put together by a foreign national.
That's absolutely true. And when we look at it, it's Christopher Steele. It's a foreign national who basically got his information from the Russians. He was paid for by an opposition political party, which was Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee. And now we see that the Democrats are trying to gear up for impeachment. For what? There is absolutely no evidence, first of all, that the president or anybody in his campaign or any American for that matter, and that's coming from Mueller's report, committed any crime. And you can't obstruct if there was no crime to commit.
Isn't it the reverse, Professor? You're a great defense attorney. But if you don't have the evidence to indict, isn't it the reverse of what should happen in terms of creating a cloud of suspicion in spite of lack of evidence?
Absolutely. First of all, no prosecutor could ever say that a person is guilty, because prosecutors only hear one side of the case. They don't have their evidence cross-examined. There's no defense lawyer. There's no opportunity to challenge. There's no due process. So all a prosecutor can ever say is there's sufficient evidence to indict. Let's move it to the next step, which is a trial with all the adversarial defenses. And then we can determine whether a crime was committed.
But he did not rely on.
Could never have said there was a crime.
Remember, the people like Nadler wanted out of the independent counsel statute. They got it. The person in charge under the special counsel statute would be the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, Office of Legal Counsel. They were giving the task by Mueller to make the decision. They made it despite whatever department procedures and rules might have been in place or constitutional issues regarding whether or not you can indict a sitting president. It did not factor in, and they were very clear.
Look, one point that's clear is if you cannot indict a sitting president, why do you have a special counsel to investigate a sitting president? Special counsel are not supposed to just make history, write for the future. They're supposed to decide one issue. Is there sufficient evidence to indict or isn't there? And if Mueller says that that's a moot issue, what was he doing? He should have ended this investigation the day they determined that there was no evidence of collusion, and he continued it on and on and on, and that was a serious mistake.
Quick, I'm almost out of time.
This was such a canard that he peddled today, Bob Mueller. He tried to blame it on the Office of Legal Counsel. Remember what that opinion says. It says you can't indict or prosecute a sitting president. Mueller could have simply said, if he had the evidence, and he didn't, he could have said there is sufficient evidence to bring an obstruction charge. That is not a prosecution. It's not an indictment. He would leave it to the Attorney General. He didn't do that because he doesn't have the evidence. And the professor's right. That's exactly what Ken Starr did. So, to put it in blunt terms, Mueller was just lying to the American people, both in his report and today.
All right. Thank you all for your insight, your observations. Great analysis that you cannot get anywhere else because everyone else is insane. Just one of those moments in life.